Hi, Mom. I was just wondering when you're gonna leave.
Paige Birgfeld seemed to have it all: a loving family, successful businesses, and a beautiful home. But on the 28th of June, 2007, she vanished without a trace, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. What could have happened to this successful businesswoman who seemed to have everything going for her? Later, the investigators uncovered the truth about her, that she had been living a double life. She was struggling, and she had turned to escort work to make ends meet. So, she was a mother by day and an escort by night. But who could have possibly wanted to harm this mother of three? Was it a client from her escort work, or was it someone closer to home? Paige Birgfeld was born on April 27, 1973, in Colorado, and grew up happily surrounded by her parents, Suzanne and Frank, and her brother, Craig. Her father, Frank, was a real estate broker, and throughout his life, he climbed the ranks to become the vice president of the company where he had worked his whole career. Paige grew up in a happy upper-middle-class family, lacking nothing. She was an outgoing, independent, and athletic girl. She had many friends and was highly appreciated. Moreover, she was very family-oriented from a young age and always dreamed of becoming a mother. She was particularly close to her father, who attended all her matches, dance ballets, and swimming competitions. In high school, Paige met Ron Bagler, her first love, and they were crazy about each other. After graduating, Paige decided to continue her studies to become a nurse, and Ron followed her on this journey. In her adulthood, Paige found it challenging to strike a balance between her desire for independence, her relationship with Ron, and her academic pursuits. Unfortunately, this struggle resulted in a decline in her grades. She eventually decided to drop out, and in 1995, she and Ron returned to Colorado to settle down. At the age of 22, Paige and Ron got married, and as it had been her dream since she was young, she was eager to become a mother. However, Ron didn't share her impatience, nor did he have the same vision for the future. He wasn't in a rush to have children and didn't know if he would ever want them. This was a huge blow to Paige, and the difference in opinion caused a gradual but evident rift between her and her husband over time. 2 years after their marriage in 1997, she decided to leave him. She could not give up on having children, but the separation went rather well. Paige found herself single again, and she needed money, so she decided to work at a strip club in Denver where she danced under the name Madison. It was a lucrative job, and at just 24 years old, she told one of her friends that she could earn up to $400,000 a year. It was at this strip club that she met the man who would become her second husband, Rob. Paige immediately fell for Rob, not only because she found him very attractive, but also because he had an excellent financial situation. His parents had made a fortune by investing in the new technologies of the time. He was, so to speak, ahead of his time and had earned a lot of money. At the beginning of their relationship, they went on vacations and frequented the most beautiful places. In their early years of marriage, Rob would shower Paige with luxurious gifts, including expensive jewelry, and they dreamed of having children together. Eventually, at the age of 25, they decided to settle in the small town of Grand Junction, where Rob had a $1 million mansion built in a desirable residential area. Shortly after that, they had 3 beautiful children. They had a daughter and 2 sons. Paige felt fulfilled living her dream as a loving mother and wife. Their extravagant lifestyle did not go unnoticed, as they were the wealthiest couple in town, living in the most beautiful and expensive house, leading a comfortable life. However, things began to deteriorate when Rob experienced several professional setbacks. He was reckless with his money and invested millions in risky commercial enterprises, which eventually led to mounting bills and financial troubles. Paige did what she could to support her husband, including starting a business selling baby slings. She also started a small dance school for children, combining her love for children with her passion for dance. She also sold high-end kitchen supplies for a company called Pampered Chef, which had a referral-based network marketing system. Despite Rob's financial troubles, Paige was an excellent seller and even won a free trip to the Caribbean for her efforts. Unfortunately, despite Paige's efforts, Rob lost their money much faster than she could earn it. The couple began to experience financial difficulties, and this caused tension in their relationship. Rob became increasingly irritable and angry, and the news of their financial problems spread throughout the town. They were no longer considered benefactors of the city, and rumors of financial malfeasance began to circulate.
Where's your emergency?
My husband and I were in a fight, and he was supposed to watch my children while I went to work, and he said that I would come home and find them all murdered.
In 2004, the couple's financial struggles came to a head when Paige called 911 after an argument with Rob. She reported that during their argument, Rob, who was supposed to watch the children while she had to go to work, made a threatening comment that she would come home to find them all murdered. The police arrived at their home, but the dispute had already been resolved, so they left without charging Rob. Despite their efforts to reconcile, their finances continued to spiral out of control. They had mortgaged their home and were paying over $6,000 in mortgage fees each month. Paige refused to give up their beautiful home and didn't want her children to suffer from their financial problems. To make ends meet, she decided to start an escort service. She knew that stripping paid well, but didn't want to risk being recognized, so she signed up on an escort site under the name Carrie. Paige found herself in a difficult financial situation and turned to offering sensual massages and other sexual services for a high fee. In 2005, she launched her own escort business called Model Inc., which helped her support her family and pay off their debts. However, her husband was unaware of her escorting activities and believed that she was earning more from selling other products. One day, he discovered lingerie in her car, which led to a heated confrontation and eventually to domestic violence. Paige reported the incident to the police, and her husband was charged with assault and had to attend anger management classes. The revelation of her escort activities and the violence that ensued took a toll on their marriage, and they decided to divorce in 2006. The divorce was a painful process for Paige, who was concerned about losing custody of her children to her ex-husband. She fought hard to keep her family home and filed for bankruptcy in 2007, with her ex-husband paying only $500 per month in child support and her large mortgage payment of nearly $6,000 per month. Paige had to rely on herself to make ends meet. Despite the challenges, she was determined to provide for her family, even if it meant continuing with her escort business. Paige's concerns about her safety began to grow, and she confided in her friends that she feared for her life. Not only did she fear her ex-husband, but she was also scared by other men. She had told one of her friends that one night after closing her office, she went downstairs to her car where she saw a truck pull up to block her in. As she was trying to leave in her minivan, she reversed and gunned it hard, hitting the car behind her just to create space and escape, and she was left extremely scared by the experience. After her divorce, Paige had reconnected with her first husband Ron, and on June 28, 2007, they decided to meet up for a picnic in nature. They spent a pleasant afternoon together, and when they decided to separate, they promised to call each other when they arrived home. Ron called Paige the next morning but could not reach her. He became worried because he knew that she always kept her phone on in case there was a problem with her children. He decided to call her ex-wife's landline, and it was Paige's daughter Jessie who answered, and told him that her mother had not come home the previous night, and she was worried. Despite telling the babysitter that she would be home late, Paige had given no indication of her whereabouts. The babysitter, who initially thought Paige would come home the next morning, was also anxious about not hearing from her. Paige was a responsible person, and it was unlike her to break her word, especially when it concerned her children. On the other end, Paige's children were also worried. Her daughter Jessie, who was only 8 years old, had become increasingly impatient about her mother's return. She tried calling her several times but only reached her voicemail. Meanwhile, Frank was also very concerned about not being able to reach his daughter. He lived 4 hours away from Denver and did not hesitate to take action. After the nanny and Jessie reported Paige's disappearance to the police station, he promptly hit the road and also filed a missing persons report for his daughter. Ron did the same on his side. He called 911 and reported that Paige was missing. As soon as her disappearance was reported to the authorities, investigators and volunteers, including Paige's father and brother, began searching. They scoured all the wooded areas around and nearby deserts, but to no avail. Meanwhile, investigators turned their attention to Paige's ex-husbands. Rob was the initial suspect, but he was thousands of kilometers away at the time of her disappearance. He was also very shocked by the news, and he took a plane ticket as soon as he heard to be with his children. So, Rob was quickly ruled out, and police now looked to Ron. He was indeed the last person to see her alive, but his phone data proved that at the time of the disappearance, he was near Denver during rush hour, so he couldn't be in two places at the same time. He was also ruled out immediately. 3 days after Paige's disappearance on July 1, 2007, someone reported a car burning. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they discovered Paige's red Ford Focus completely engulfed in flames. Obviously, it was arson because there was nothing else but the burned car. Furthermore, the car was parked in a place where Paige did not frequent. After the firefighters intervened and quickly extinguished the fire, the police noticed that the driver's seat was completely reclined, suggesting that a very tall person was driving the car. Paige was 5 feet and 3 inches, and she would never have been able to reach the pedals. In addition, the fire had started on the passenger side, and an accelerator had been used. Clearly, someone was trying to destroy evidence. The most interesting thing was that the police found Paige's day planner in the car, which had miraculously survived the fire. Investigators immediately noticed that 4 dates had been torn out of the calendar: June 26, 27, 28, and 29, which were the dates of Paige's disappearance. Now, this was no longer a simple disappearance. Obviously, it was a crime. But the family and friends of Paige still had a little hope to find her alive. They wanted to believe that maybe she was being held somewhere. Several days after Paige's burned-out car was found in Grand Junction, a motorist on the highway heading southeast out of the city made a discovery. When the driver stopped to fix his tire, he noticed something strange: Paige's checkbook. Investigators soon found her personal checks, her business cards, and a lot of other personal items that were dropped on that road. With all this personal stuff found, the investigators found out something more shocking. Paige had been living a double life. They found out about her escort business Models Inc. The investigation took a different turn when they learned she used a second phone for this activity, and they focused on clients who called her on the night she disappeared. She received numerous calls that day, and they identified numerous suspects. Before disappearing, Paige received calls from a mysterious man using a prepaid phone. During questioning, the police discovered that Paige had expressed concerns about a man with a white van. 3 of her clients drove a white van, and Lester Jones stood out as he had a criminal past and served time in prison for sexual assault and kidnapping. Lester was a mechanic working in a garage across from where Paige's car was found burned. Investigators contacted Lester on July 5th, and during the 2-hour interrogation, he cooperated fully, giving them his fingerprints and DNA, as well as the keys to his van. They discovered that he had hired Paige for an erotic massage a year earlier and made an appointment to see her the day before her disappearance. However, she had sent a friend to meet him instead. They searched his home and workplace, where they found a list of escorts, men's wigs, gasoline, condoms, Viagra, and the packaging for a prepaid phone. After tracing the purchase of the phone, it was found to be owned by Lester, who denied being the individual captured in the surveillance footage. Despite their suspicions and Lester's past, they couldn't charge him for 5 years, causing anguish for Paige's family, who feared the case would remain unsolved. But in March 2012, hikers found human remains in a ravine close to where Paige's belongings were scattered. The remains of Paige were quickly identified through dental records and DNA analysis. While the cause of death could not be determined, the injuries to her skull and traces of adhesive tape on it suggested that she was murdered. Lester was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping in November 2014. At his trial, he pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors alleged that Lester had hired Paige for her services in the past, but she had refused to see him again. They claimed that Lester was a frustrated man who had already committed acts of violence against women to get what he wanted. He allegedly strangled Paige at his home and dumped her body in a ravine before returning her car to Grand Junction, where he set it on fire. The trial began in July 2016, 9 years after Paige's death. Over the course of the trial, prosecutors called 80 witnesses to the stand, including Paige's family members and medical examiners. Lester had a criminal record and had previously served time in prison. A former partner testified to Lester's violent past, including an incident where he abducted and sexually assaulted her at gunpoint. Lester's defense argued that he was not responsible for Paige's death and that she had many other clients as an escort. His current wife testified that she was aware of his frequent visits to prostitutes but did not leave him because of her religious beliefs. After 22 days of testimony and arguments, the first trial ended in a mistrial because the jury was unable to reach a verdict. The prosecutors decided to retry the case, and the second trial began just 10 weeks later. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury found Lester guilty of all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Paige's murder. He was also found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to an additional 12 years. Lester Jones is still in prison today, but he has appealed his conviction by arguing that there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. Paige's children are now growing up without their mother and living with their father. They prefer to remain discreet and are currently 23, 21, and 18 years old. When the case first came to light, it caused a scandal. As one of the inspectors stated, he had never seen a prostitution case involving the mother of a family of that level before. As for Paige, she certainly had the ability to do something else, but she probably wanted to make a lot of money easily. When the bills began to pile up, she had to think about how to quickly earn large sums of money. Thus, as a millionaire woman in her 30s, she could no longer undress in clubs without taking the risk of being recognized. She turned to a slightly more discreet activity, escorting. So, she must have thought she had the situation under control. One client she provided a massage for was Lester, who recognized her and knew who her ex-husband was. After she refused to see him again, he began stalking her. While there isn't much information about Lester, it's possible that he was a frustrated man who had been cheating on his wife with prostitutes regularly. Maybe he had some unconfessed fantasies and had collected wigs and a list of prostitutes with their measurements and bra sizes. When he contacted Paige online, he may not have known who she was since she didn't post a photo of her face on her ad. He wanted control over this millionaire's ex-wife, but she reserved the right to select her clients. When she refused to see him again, he began to harass and stalk her. Paige tried to distance herself from Lester, but he became obsessed with the idea of having another meeting with her. It's unclear whether Paige eventually met him that night or fell into a trap, but it's possible that Lester's repeated refusals from prostitutes and Paige's rejection triggered his anger and frustration. Despite her poor choices, Paige's ultimate fate was tragic, as she lost her life while striving to provide her children with a comfortable upbringing. listening. It is heart-wrenching to think about our children growing up without their mother, especially given their tender age when she disappeared. I hope Paige's children were able to build a good life despite losing their mother at a very young age. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow for more crime stories.